Welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Albert Chiu. Our discussion today centers on the mainland Southeast Asian countries and their role in U.S. China relations. Geographically, Vietnam, Laos, Myanmar, and Cambodia are strategically positioned between the Pacific and Indian Oceans close to China and India as important parts of Mekong River Economic Zone. They form a critical link between China, Southeast Asia, and South Asia. Notable developments include the international focus on Myanmar, civil war, and the changing relationship between China and Vietnam following Xi Jinping's visit. Joining us today are Leonard Chao, former Taiwan ambassador to Swaziland and National Tsinghua University adjunct professor, and Yuan I, National Chengchi University Institute of International Relations adjunct research fellow. A very warm welcome back on the show.
Thank you.
Ambassador Chao, so what is your perspective on the recent severe conflict in Myanmar, regarded as the most significant challenge in recent years, despite China's mediation leading to peace talks between Myanmar's government's forces and rebels within Chinese borders, the subsequent temporarily ceasefire agreements, the conflict seems to persist. How do you interpret the ongoing situation in Myanmar?
Myanmar is one of the gravest potential flashpoints in the world affairs, because that as a matter of fact, in just less than 1 year ago, in the G20 summit in San Francisco, the member states are talking about some of the global issues, and some of the ASEAN members, Southeast Asian members, countries, they're talking about the solution of the crisis in Myanmar, more specifically, the civil war. Yes, the Myanmar, already, I think that happened in the year 2021 in February. That's a coup. That's a coup. As you know, that the famous icon of Myanmar, Aung San Suu Kyi. The democratization has been faltering process of democratization has just came to abrupt, end in February 2021. So when the military seized the power from the democratically elected government, Aung San Suu Kyi's team, but the subsequent protest and the military's, violent crackdown, in response, have left the country, have left the country facing a civil war. Now that people are talking about the solution, even the ASEAN members say they're really worried about the possible widespread, the outspread of the impact of the war, of the civil war in Myanmar. But now that it seems the current military junta, establishment in the Yangon, seems they're kind of turning a deaf ear to the ASEAN countries' requests. They are trying to help the Myanmar military government to find a solution, I think, in a very reasonable and very workable manner. But the military government in Myanmar seems to be trapped in a kind of a self-destructing cycle. They don't seem to be able to face the reality. So this civil war has a good, is a very ongoing crisis.
All right, that is a very comprehensive, good introduction to this conflict in Myanmar.
That's right.
But also, Professor Yuan, could you please help us to understand the whole situation more from the CCP, Chinese Communist Party's perspective? How, what's the strategy of Xi Jinping and also the CCP to deal with the conflict in this region?
I think the Myanmar demonstrated something that is similar. Resemble that of West African states. Those are the, in essence, post-colonial states. Well, all those states faces very similar cycle, repetition of the disorder of the past decades. But what makes the Myanmar situation distinctive from those of the West African states pattern, I think it has to do with China, because the very unique location next to China with this rising power. So China play in the past so far pivotal role. Nowhere else, no one could has usher such a roles to cater the needs of maintain stability over on a regional perspective. So I would say China's role to mediate this turmoil, domestic turmoil across the border, sound positively in a way. However, it still face a similar daunting challenge that is unstable. Once the unstable factors setting, that they would regain its momentum. Still, all in all, Chinese of this administration, government of this administration, the previous administration, has launched a comprehensive tackling about the relation with Myanmar, namely economic assistance to usher for this neighbor state to help to create a stable environment for the sake of Chinese own sake. That is why China was seeking an outpost to have access to Indian Ocean, to open a new port. I think that from the national interest of China, it served well. However, there is a high price to pay.
Okay, you talk about the outpost. You talk about the reach out in this region from the CCP's perspective. That's very important because we are now talking about a Ramree Island, a Chinese enterprise heavily invested in 2009 to construct a deep sea port, act as China's access point, as Professor just mentioned, to the Indian Ocean, and is central to the China-Myanmar economic corridor. This island is also a crucial element of the Chinese Communist Party's Belt and Road Initiative. Myanmar's military government leader, Min Aung Hlaing, has permitted the Myanmar's military to breach the ceasefire agreements, even initiating severe attacks on Ramree Island from sea and air. So what does this imply? Does it indicate a shift in Myanmar-China relationship? Ambassador, you can go first.
Well, in essence, okay, China and Myanmar, actually their relations, as to put in the Burmese language, which is pronounced like Paw Fall. I hope I get it right. Okay, in Burmese, that means what? It means a symmetric obligations relations between the two countries. Namely, China can help, Myanmar more than the other way around. And Myanmar, meanwhile, they're depending on China more than the other way around. So, as a Professor Yuan put it earlier, that China is using Myanmar as one of the few access to Indian Ocean. But also, let's not forget that China has been the major, most significant supplier of some of the military, needs and some of the weapons and the training for Myanmar's military, force government. So far, right now. So the civil war has been, pouring to the border, northern border of Myanmar, between Myanmar and China. That's become, very complicated because Chinese government, theoretically, they should stand by the side of Myanmar in the military government. However, they're kind of trapped in a dilemma because that they have to help. They have to provide some necessary, assistance to the Myanmar government, but also they also have provided some of the military economic aid to the Chinese ethnic Chinese rebels, force in the northern border. So this kind of help put the China in a very interesting position. The ways of their doing is kind of both ends of the scissor because there's a profitable but also problematic. So China is very, very let me put it this way, China cannot help but to take Myanmar as a hot potato. They try to reach the peace between the military government and also some of the democratic force, rebels. But also somehow the Chinese ethnic Chinese rebels are involved as well. It make it further complicated. So right now the Myanmar is relying on the China for the help, but also they provide some backdoor. And also, let's not forget about there's an economic reason, economic factors involved. But because for China, they are natural gas, import through the Indian Ocean. A gas get to go through the central Myanmar to reach Yunnan province. That's a huge amount of natural gas.
Okay, sorry to cut you off, Ambassador. Actually, Myanmar had another problem. For example, the drug and human trafficking.
That's right.
And that's not impact not only like countries like Taiwan, but also China itself.
That's
so
right.
how could the CCP view this part of the problem kind of influencing the borders of the Chinese territory? And is that a bothering factor to the CCP?
That's right. I think the China CCP is trying to, they're approaching a twofold factor. One is that militarily they try to consolidate the defense force on the border. But secondly, on the second floor is that economically and diplomatically, the Beijing government is trying to approach the Myanmar government I think that's the only way to can put them back to the negotiation table with the democratic force in Myanmar. Other than that, because that's only. But whether it's going to be effective, I'm not quite sure. So there are people talking about you might not be able to find an easy solution to the current civil war. I think the only way can do from the Chinese government is a management, not a solution.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Professor Yuan, historically, China has prioritized developing a harmonious and friendly relationship with Myanmar, working together to build communities of common destiny. This collaboration has included advancement in the China-Myanmar economic corridor. In light of this, how can we interpret the persistent unrest in Myanmar and its present circumstances? Do you think that this leads to a major reshuffling of Myanmar's role in the Southeast Asia, or more generally, how the ASEAN countries, the role of Myanmar in it?
I think the overall strategy of Chinese approach to this region tend to be on a very, very straightforward opening posture. That is to utilize this neighboring state as a base, as a stepping stone to the ocean beyond its control. History repeats itself. During the Second World War, I think the China also faced a blockade by the Japanese naval forces. So they were somehow wondering to seek out an alternative route to reach the free world. I think in a similar vein, the Chinese approach resonates that very much simply because of geographical location. And yet, for the Chinese Communist government, I think it adopted somewhat very unique perspective. It created a collective identity. That is to the embodiment of a collective identity with all its neighboring states. So put into political rhetoric, it put heavy emphasis on the political value, the shared common value, common destiny, although it is a political rhetoric. And yet, to uphold those rhetoric, it converts into some operational manners, doing business step by step. That is why simply to foster an overall stable political environment, you have already articulated on the very, very operation of Myanmar's domestic turmoil, which offer opportunity both to the ASEAN states and also for China as well. People hope, especially ASEAN, try to maintain a very low-key posture to dealing with this, simply not wanting to violate the principle that there has been a great pound amongst the ASEAN states. In a similar vein, Chinese try very hard to work, to seek a solution very patiently. I think this will have to, the rest of the world will have to be patient to see whether would be this successful or not.
Okay, also there's another country we can never ignore is the United States. Myanmar also sought 525 million in assistance from the U.S. Congress, despite the postponement of the Myanmar bill discussion to 2024, kind of delayed that to 2024. The U.S. has consistently condemned Myanmar's military coup and rapidly implementing the sanctions. So how do you perceive the U.S. approach in contrast to CCP's? Ambassador?
Well, yeah, the U.S. and China, now they're trying to, they're again in a similar position of diffusing the crisis, after the Ukraine war, and now the China, and also China has a very, a good position to get involved in this current Myanmar crisis. But the United States, from the geopolitical, perspective, definitely will not glad to see to China getting successfully involved. But the reality is that Myanmar and China have been so closely related to each other for 5 years. So U.S. it doesn't seem to have a very promising space to get involved in the Myanmar's crisis, because the relation between U.S. and Washington and Yangon, has not been very
close,
and not been very impressive. So let alone that the U.S. domestically, any solution, any resolution from the Congress, that remains to be seen, because it's going to be election year, in 2024. And when I was in Washington, I handled the Capitol Hill affairs. I know that the Congress is trying to use any international, incident, international affairs, international dealings, trying to counteract the current Biden administration. So I think whether this kind of a congressional resolution, the congressional promise to deliver the assistance can be to handle delivery can be a really promise, can be really delivered. That remains to be seen.
Okay.
I think you'd rather wait and see. But so far, I'd like to say that in the international dealings about the Myanmar civil war crisis, China still remain, I think, one of the few decisive power factor.
Actually, you talk about the U.S. influence and how it is difficult for the Congress, especially congresspersons from the United States, to get involved in this Myanmar's affairs. Let's talk about the U.S.-China competition. Both Chinese President Xi Jinping and South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol has made proactive to Vietnam after their respective meetings with the U.S. President Biden. So now we have this quadrilateral relations. South Korea and also China, United States, and Myanmar. Additionally, China formed a China-Vietnam community of the shared destiny. Now we talk about Vietnam. So the situation where both the U.S. and China are keenly seeking Vietnam's alliance, so now we kind of shift attention to Vietnam, is further complicated by Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, and Thailand joining China's community. So Professor Yuan, so what is your perspective on Xi Jinping's trip to Vietnam and ongoing struggle between the U.S. and China for Vietnam's allegiance?
The recent visit by Xi Jinping, shows his dedication and to pursue a closer working relation with Vietnam, and this is his third visit so far. I think to visit such a place in this capacity demonstrated the urgent need for China to seek assurance from Vietnam, because 3 months ago, President Biden visited Vietnam. And the previous administration, I think ever since that Washington resumed its normal relation with Vietnam, that each successive administration pursued a similar gesture. And yet, what makes the recent visit by Xi Jinping so distinctive from American counterparts, I think it will reveal some meaning. It takes two to tango. I think for the current Vietnamese leadership, the Secretary General of the Vietnamese ruling party, Ran Zhongfu, himself demonstrated he served as the longest serving national leader for recent decades. I think that he demonstrated he played a pivotal role to upholding a so-called bamboo diplomacy. That is to have very firm roots while handling both great powers, the United States, China, more effectively, flexible. So I think the
Is that somewhat like a non-alignment policy of India, the bamboo policy?
I think it's more than that.
More than that. In what parts more?
Given the nature of the past relation, Vietnam in the last, ever since its independence, witnessed a few cycles of making different lines, first to USSR, then confronting, fighting with the United States, then confronting again with the PRC for a brief time. So Vietnam has demonstrated very unique posture vis-a-vis that all the major powers, the big powers. That makes the Vietnamese approach to great power so distinctively. So I think what makes Vietnam's so confident in dealing with its neighbor simply demonstrated they have something in their DNA. It's how to they really know how to deal with its neighbor, especially the big powers.
China. Okay, Ambassador. So does Vietnam's comprehensive strategy is strategic partner with the United States really is focused on economic cooperation rather than opposing China directly?
Well, if I may, crack a joke, rather a humorous touch, that the name of the current Vietnamese leader, okay, in the Chinese Mandarin, pronunciation is Ruan Fu Zong. Okay, sounds like a very, very soft Ruan, soft person is trying to bear some heavy workload. Ruan Fu Zong. Okay, but it's a joke. So that simply, interestingly reflect how he handles the relations with both superpowers in the world, U.S. and China. And then, I think Vietnam so far has been successfully, very effectively juggling between the U.S. and China. So getting playing, the both Biden and Xi Jinping, they have visited Vietnam for in the last half a year. So I think they are really helping the Vietnam in comparison with the other interestingly geographically geopolitically interesting located country, the Philippines. Okay, the Marcos Jr. is kind of has left behind, is falling behind Vietnam because his predecessor Duterte has been closely related to China, but now has the shift. Marcos Jr. has shipped back to the U.S. That has somehow offended China. So giving the relation between the Philippines and China getting into a very, very tough situation. In comparison, Vietnam has been enjoying so far smoothly the relation between the two powers. I think Vietnamese looking down the road, they have no reason not to continue the current path, moving ahead.
Okay. Actually, the tensions between Vietnam and China is still there, especially regarding South China Sea. It's pretty much remain unresolved, even as Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, and Thailand have aligned themselves with China. Despite this alignment, the prevailing view, the current view is that the relationship between Vietnam and China will remain stable without further escalation. So what's your opinion on this matter, Professor Yuan? Do you think that on the one hand, there's still economic bond between Vietnam and China, but also on the other hand, there's a territorial dispute between Vietnam and China. And the United States is out there, trying to, reaching out to Vietnam for, further alliance. So how can we view the whole situation, the picture?
I think on the South China Sea issue, Vietnam maintained its very, very stubborn, strong position vis-a-vis that of China. So far, Vietnam has not yielded even a single inch. So rhetoric suggests that what has been agreed upon and achieved by this recent summit is to maintain something in tacit agreement that so long as the Vietnam will not provoke and challenge China, that China will be self-restrained and also will continue to provide the economic ammunition, the benefit for the sake of Vietnam's gestures. So this is rhetoric, this is tacit agreement. And lower to the operational formula, I think that both sides have already once again repeated the time-honored agreement That is a declaration of DOC to COC code of conduct. We'll use that to foster a stable environment. So I think at most, both sides reached an agreement that to maintain a stable, which does not change anything what has been proclaimed by both sides. All right.
Ambassador, you mentioned in the beginning of the show that there are hotspots in the world that in the past year, and Myanmar was one of them.
Sure.
Even maybe more dangerous than the Taiwan Strait. What about the South China Sea between Vietnam and China next year in 2024?
Well, as a matter of fact, I recall that a recent survey done in Singapore, one of the major think tanks in Singapore, and also another, similar, research done by in the think tank in Australia. The survey indicate one common, result. That is in terms of the influence over Southeast Asia between China and U.S. Seemingly that so far that China seems to be more influential than the United States. So that worries United States, that worries Washington D.C. somehow. So China, because economically, so far for Southeast Asia, the overall Southeast Asian, the regional geopolitical interest, that still economy is the name of the game. Not a